Good morning, well, good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. We're starting a little early. We'll just give people a couple of minutes to get in here now. I hope everyone's well. I hope everyone's doing great. We'll just make sure the stream has gone live here in a minute. So we're doing things a little bit early. That's okay. Let's just make sure we are live here. Oh yeah, we are. There's my ugly mug. So today we're just I'm hearing myself coming back, so there must be another tab open. So just give me a sec. We'll get through these couple of technical issues. All right. Glad to see you for real too. welcome. So we're trying the new time for the live shows. I did one a couple of weeks back, and then funny enough, even with all this COVID thing, I got super busy. There it is. I'm no longer hearing myself. Yay! All right. We'll just give it a couple more minutes, guys, till the starting time here, and then we will get things underway. I hope everyone's well. I know these crazy times, man. We've been, it's just, the world's been crazy, but it looks like a lot of countries are coming out the other end of all this, so that's super exciting. It means we all get back out in nature and do our thing, which is exactly what I've been looking for to do. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes, guys. We'll let people check in here. Have you guys been doing any home projects? You've been doing anything fun at home to keep your creativity high? Yeah, glad to see you too. All right. All right, how we going here? We've got 15 on. I've got my morning coffee, so whatever you're drinking, cheers. If you're having your afternoon drinks or your morning coffee. Hey, John, welcome, buddy. Welcome. Going well, mate. Going good. All right. Hey, Jocelyn, welcome, buddy. Good to have you here, mate. Plenty. All right, that's just about time. So let's just get started anyway. Other people will start popping in, hopefully. Gonna try. I know I said last time I was gonna try to do this a bit more regularly, but unfortunately, things. You took a photo of a fridge. Oh, cool, awesome. That's cool. So you can snap things when you're out and about, when you're actually doing things you're allowed to do, which is super cool. So anyway, how it's going to work today, I'm just going to run through a couple of things. We're going to start with a few little basics. Probably go for about, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes, we'll see. I always underestimate how long things take, so forgive me if it takes a little bit longer. We're going to run through just the histogram. We're going to quickly run through the exposure triangle. I know a lot of you know that already, but there may be a few new people that will just touch on that. And then we're going to jump over to Lightroom, and I'm just going to show you, a few examples of and talk about not so much the actual photo, but we're going to look at the histogram. And g'day Warwick, how are you, mate? And we're going to I am invisible. Okay, cool. We're going to look at the histogram, and we're going to work out a few different scenarios about how we would use exposure in different scenarios. If we've got a high dynamic range, say, or if we've got a flat scene, what your histogram may look like. Okay, so I am on my first coffee, guys, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm usually 2 coffees before I get things ticked off, but it's 7 after 7:30 now, so it's not too early here, but it's usually I'm still waking up doing my meditation and that at this time. So I just thought starting off a bit earlier might give everyone a bit more a chance around the world to jump on. I know it's hard to get a time when everyone's available, but that's all good. All right, let's jump into this. Hey Andrew, welcome, buddy, welcome. All right, let's jump over here, and I'm just going to change my scene here. Let's see if we got the right thing. Ah, yes, look at that. We picked a winner. Hey, Jane, morning. Welcome, welcome. All right, so what I'll say too, if you've got any questions, we might hold them off to the end. If you lose me at some stage, or the video's a bit choppy, or anything like that, please just give me some feedback in the chat. I'd love to hear that. So here's some basics. We're looking at, this is basically, and a lot of people have heard this. This is the exposure triangle, okay? And this is basically the three things that control your exposure in your camera, okay? So we obviously got the shutter speed. That's the speed of the shutter that goes back and forth over the sensor. And you'll see as we go down this way around the triangle, that's going to let more light in and make things brighter, okay? If we go clockwise around, and anti-clockwise is going to make things darker, okay? So you can see here, 1/250th, obviously that's reasonably fast, okay? And then down here, we've got 1 second, okay? And obviously your camera does a lot more than that, but this, just for this example, this is what they've got on the triangle, okay? So as we go down here, 1 second, we're letting more light in, your shutter's open longer, okay? And the same here as well, the smaller aperture, obviously it's gonna let less light in. And people get confused by aperture a fair bit because, it's like the bigger the number, the smaller the hole. So that's how I always think about it. The bigger the number, the smaller the hole. The littler the number in your aperture or your f-stop, the bigger the hole, okay? All right. And same with your ISO. Your ISO is a lot easier to understand. That's the sensitivity of the sensor, okay? That's how sensitive to light it is, okay? So when the little number is 50 or 100, that's not that sensitive. But the higher the number, the more sensitive the camera sensor is. Okay, that's the basics, right? Obviously, there's lots of different things, with shutter speed. Obviously, the slower the shutter speed, the more movement you're going to get in a frame, which we do a lot in landscape and nature photography. We like to use those slower shutter speeds and blur water or show movement and things like that. And aperture for landscape and nature photography is super important. Often we're around that f8 to f16 because we're trying to get everything in focus, and that's the depth of field that you have with those apertures, okay? And ISO the same. We're trying to keep our ISO nice and low. We're trying to keep our images noise free, because as we up the ISO, the more grain or the more noise gets added, okay? And every camera is different. There's no like sweet spot setting when it comes to, shutter speed's a creative thing, a creative tool that you use. ISO, there's no like sweet spot. You need to know, what your camera can handle. But basically the lower, the better is what we aim for. And there are times when we will use a faster shutter speed, okay? Alrighty, let's just jump over here to Lightroom now. And I just wanted to talk quickly about the histogram, okay? Can you guys see that histogram up in that right corner there, okay? Is that okay there? Tell me if you can't see it that well. Hopefully you can see it. I tried to make it bigger on the, oh, there you go. Look at that, I can make it a little bit bigger. There we go. I tried to make my resolution of my screen quite big so you guys can see that histogram there, okay? All right, so when we're looking at the histogram, what's cool about looking at the histogram in Lightroom is that we can see the histogram is broken up into basically 4 sections, okay? So on the left, we have the black, so that's the darks, okay, the darker areas. And then the next segment we have is the shadows, okay? So this is the dark side. And then the middle is all those midtones, so for instance, in this image, the midtones might be these well-exposed rocks here and things like that, okay? And then we have, the highlights and the whites on the right. Let me know if you can't see that histogram good enough, guys, and I'll try and bring it up bigger, but it looks okay on the video. So, all right, so that's basically how we have it. And a little ninja tip when you're in Lightroom is actually, if I was to just click and hold, say on this blacks area, and move my mouse left and right, look at the black slider. It actually controls that part of the histogram. How cool is that? So there's a little extra bonus ninja tip there, okay? And the same with the shadows. You can see it opens up the shadow area there. And the same with the midtones. We can adjust all the exposure there by the midtones. And the same with the highlights and the whites. So that's kind of cool. I think that's a cool thing that's in Lightroom there. So I'm just going to reset this image anyway. And what I wanted to show you is just a couple of examples of what I would do in certain situations. Now we've got a basic understanding. We know that aperture, ISO, and shutter speed affect our exposure. When we're out in the field, basically what we've got to do is look at that histogram. It's super important. So if you are on a more modern mirrorless camera, you know, you can look through the viewfinder and you'll be able to see a live histogram in there, and it's super, super helpful. Okay. And the same when you live view. If you are on like a DSLR type of camera, then usually what you need to do is bring up the live view, scroll through your info settings till you find your histogram, and often you can have a live histogram that way. You know, if you can't use a live histogram through your live view on the back of the camera when you're out shooting, then often what you need to do is to look at your exposure by the it's been that long since I've used the DSLR, but there's a little meter inside there you'll see that moves back and forth. So and that gives you a bit of an idea, you know, when it's in the center, that your camera's saying that the scene is properly exposed, okay? And to the left is underexposed and to the right will be overexposed. But once you take your shot, you can scroll through the settings and see what the histogram is after the fact. Most cameras in live view, you'll be able to see that histogram, okay? All right, coffee. All right. So let's get into it. So basically what I wanted to show you is a couple of examples. So don't worry about the photograph, okay? It's just it's a beautiful waterfall. This is Minamara waterfall in Budaroo National Park. I was there earlier this year before the COVID lockdown stuff. So pretty cool spot, a beautiful waterfall. And we just had some rain, which was awesome. But I didn't get any wet rocks, which would have helped with this lichen and that. But anyway, it doesn't matter. No, that's another story. All right, let's jump into it. Yeah, so say we went to a scene. Okay, so here's the example. We went to a scene. We went to shoot sunrise or sunset. Of course, we want to be there for the golden hour. But when we got there, there was no clouds towards the sun. So we decided we would shoot away. Okay, so when I mean shoot away is we're not going to shoot directly into the sun. We're going to either shoot with the sun coming from the left or right, which would be side lit, or we're going to shoot with the sun behind us, which would be front lit. Okay. Usually I recommend for landscape photography, you know, side lit often is a more flattering light, okay? And the reason being, because it's side lit, you get more interesting shadows and highlights, and you get more interesting light across texture, okay? So if we were planned and we're going to shoot sunrise, sunset, but what happened is the clouds were all behind us, so we have to shoot away. So normally what happens in that situation, you're not shooting towards directly into the sun, so your histogram would probably look something like this. Don't worry about the sliders on moving, guys. Just pay attention to the histogram. That's all we're worried about. And don't worry about the photograph, okay? It's going to look all over the place, so that's not important. What's important is this histogram. So what would probably happen is you'd get there, you'd be in the field, and you'll know your camera will be able to handle that dynamic range. Dynamic range is the amount of light between the dark shadows and the bright highlights, and all that light in between is the dynamic range, okay? And unfortunately, our cameras can't see as much dynamic range as we can see with our own eyes, all right? So we have to do different things in camera to capture all that light, all right? So what would happen is when you're not shooting towards the direct bright sun, okay, or even slightly side lit, sometimes you can get some bright highlights coming in as well. We're shooting away from that. We would have a histogram that would look something like this, and our camera would be able to capture that dynamic range all in one photograph, okay? And that's what's super awesome about shooting away. You know, often we get caught up shooting towards the sunrise or the sunset, but what we're actually doing is we're giving ourselves more work in camera and more work in post to capture that image. I'm not saying don't ever do that, but always keep an eye on what's going on behind you. It's super important to be looking around, okay? But you can see here, we've hardly got any blacks clipping or shadows. We've hardly got any whites clipping or highlights there. We've got a nice looking histogram, okay? Everything's looking nice and yummy there. Sometimes what you may want to do if you're finding, you know, you're having trouble, you know, with the whites pushing up a little bit like that. So you can see we're starting to get some clipping on the right hand side there, even though it's quite balanced, okay, the whole histogram now. All right, we're in camera. Remember, we're in camera. We're out shooting the scene, guys. Okay, so I probably should explain the settings. So usually, what I would do, I should have explained this a bit earlier. I apologize. Usually, what I would do when I'm out there setting up my exposure, is I will set my aperture. It's usually between that f8 to f16. Okay, set my ISO as low as I can go, and then I'd be moving my shutter speed back and forth. Okay. There is times, like this waterfall, for instance, here, where you want your shutter speed at a certain shutter speed because you want to get that certain amount of flow, okay? And then it takes a little bit of juggling between your ISO and your f-stop to get the right exposure, all right? And that's where we've got those three sides of the triangle. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. So but if I'm just out shooting a normal landscape scene and shutter speed isn't a priority, aperture is always my priority because I'm trying to get that depth of field. And I don't mean the priority shooting mode. I mean my priority, because I'm usually shooting manual, okay? But my priority in my camera is my aperture to make sure I'm getting that depth of field, to make sure everything's nice and sharp, because that's what's important to me most of the time, because it's something we can't fix in post, Anyway, so let's get back to this. So say we were out here, we're shooting away, and we found, we've got our exposure pretty close here. We're in manual, we've got our aperture set right, but our shutter speed, we're still having problems here. We're getting a little bit of clipping, even though we're shooting away. The sky is a little bit bright. We don't have any filters on us to pull back that sky, or we can't use our filters. Then we would underexpose this scene by a little bit. It's always better to underexpose, guys. And I'm not saying crazily underexposed. I'm just saying, maybe by a stop. So say we had this scene and I said, you know what? I'm just going to underexpose it a little bit just to bring back those highlights. So maybe I'd be underexposed by about a stop now. All right. And you can see, even though I've underexposed it now, so I've dropped my shutter speed down a little bit, to underexpose this scene. Now, this is probably a better histogram for this scene to capture in one photograph. Okay, does that all make sense? Let me know if anything doesn't make sense, guys. Just say, that doesn't make sense in the comments. But now we're able to capture this scene in one photograph. So we don't have to bracket. We've got nothing to do in post. We've underexposed the scene. We've got a little bit of clipping here. You can see on the right-hand side in the highlights. We've got a little bit of clipping here in the shadows, okay? But the highlights are the priority at the moment. And the reason being is once we lose detail out of those highlights, they're gone forever. Once we really blow them out big time, they're gone forever. And yes, depending on the resolution of your camera, depending on the dynamic range it can capture, it just depends, how much of that detail you can pull back in your camera. And that's something you'll learn over time by shooting with your camera and processing with your camera, okay? Every camera's different. But I know for my cameras that I shoot, if I had underexposed this scene and my histogram looked like that, I know for certain that I can bring back those highlights and, get detail in the shadows and not have them too noisy, because that's what happens with the shadows, guys. If you had shadows that look like this, and you tried to open them up, what's going to happen is you're going to have all this noise or grain that gets pushed into that area because it's super underexposed, okay? I'll just go back. So remember, we're shooting for the highlights, okay? When we're trying to capture everything in a single image, trying to capture all that dynamic range. And normally our scene is side lit, or normally, so the sun's coming from the left or the right, the light, or it's front lit, okay? And we can capture everything in one shot like this, all right? So next situation, can you imagine if we're out in the field, we're going to capture that yummy sunrise, sunset, okay, and now, but the clouds are in front of us and we're going to be looking forward and we're just getting pumped. The sun's going down. And normally when we shoot, we're waiting for that sun just to dip over the horizon line. And then we're trying to get that light to come up underneath the cloud. And it's going to be super bright. The dynamic range is going to be off the chart because you're going to have this bright, bright sky and these bright, dark foreground elements, okay? And we're trying to capture all that in one and have detail across everywhere. And that's where it becomes, a little bit more tricky, because we have to think, okay, my camera's not going to capture all this dynamic range. I have to shoot either what's called bracketing images. So we're going to have to shoot an image at a normal exposure and maybe 1 2 stops under and 1 4 stops under, or maybe 1 stop under and 1 2 stop under and 1 2 stop over. And that's fine. Auto bracketing is fine, okay? But usually what I will do is I will be in manual looking at my histogram And this can happen, you know. You can be out shooting and you think you've captured all that dynamic range by setting your auto exposure bracketing, and that's a whole nother thing, guys, okay? But that's basically, your camera does it on auto. It takes those images before and after the central exposure, you know, a couple of stops before and after, and it captures all that dynamic range, and then you have to merge that in post, you know, in Lightroom or Photoshop or something like that to blend all those exposures together, okay? But I tend to do it in manual, okay? So let's set up the scenario, okay? We set up, sun's just about to drop, or, you know, we want to try and capture that starburst, so we're looking at a bright sun. And usually the rule of thumb, guys, for exposure, when you've got the sun in the scene, when you can see the sun, okay, it's going to be so intense that that dynamic range that it's okay to blow that sun out, okay? It's going to be times when you will blow that area of the sky out, okay? And don't feel bad about that. You know, if the sun's in the scene, it's okay to blow that area out. And sometimes that's a creative choice, okay? So even though I say, you know, we're going to capture all that dynamic range and everything's going to be sweet, when you can see the sun, it's okay to blow that area out, okay? That's a creative choice that you get to make. And this is where, you know, we don't often think about exposure as being a creative choice, but it certainly is, okay? It certainly is, okay? And I will show some examples a bit later. And I need a drink of water. Actually, I'm going to finish my coffee first. Good. Excuse me. So good to catch up with you guys too. I hope everyone is well. All right. So next situation, shooting into the sun. Okay. What we're going to do is we get to the scene, we set up our tripod, but unfortunately, and don't worry about the photograph, guys. Fortunately, you know, a histogram looks something like that. And our photo hopefully doesn't look like that, because that looks terrible. But you get the idea. We're looking at the histogram. It's not about the photograph, guys, okay? So we get there and our histogram looks like this, and we're like, what are we going to do here? Like, if you look at the histogram, we're shooting into the sun. My camera just can't capture all that dynamic range. I've got the highlights clipping here. I've got the shadows clipping back here. And, you know, no matter what I do, if I underexpose, we've still got clipping. If I overexpose, you know, there's still clipping in the shadows, still clipping in the highlights. So there's nothing we can do with a photograph like this, okay? Not in a single shot, because we're like, I'm not going to be able to capture all that dynamic range. There's nothing we can do. So that's where we have to make the decision to go, okay, it's time to shoot multiple images to bracket, so that, you know, we can blend in post, and we've got all that light. We've captured everything there, okay? And what I would do is this, if we've got clipping on the left, clipping on the right, that's where our histogram's pushing up over here and here. This would be my central exposure, okay? So what I'm trying to do is get a neutral exposure as my base exposure for this image, okay? And usually what you want to do, clipping, yeah, great. So clipping is just basically that. You can see there on the right-hand side of the histogram, we have the whites are clipping at the end of the histogram, meaning, you know, my camera can't capture that dynamic range past that point. That area is blown out. Can you see that red area there? That's clipping, okay? And the same on the left. You know, if I highlight these, you see the blue areas, that's the shadow areas. That's getting pushed out the side of the dynamic range of my camera. So my camera can't capture that information in those areas. It's going to be, you know, super dark, and probably if I open up those areas in post, they're going to be full of noise and color noise and look really, really murky and not very nice, okay? And the same with the highlights. The highlights is the opposite. You know, once we lose that dynamic range in that area, then that's going to be clipping, and it's not going to have any information we can bring back at all, okay? Yes, there is times where you can bring back some information depending on the dynamic range of your camera. But in general, if I saw a histogram like this, I'd be going, okay, I need to bracket this scene so that I can capture all this dynamic range and merge it together, okay? Does that make sense? All right. So we've got this scene. We know we can't capture it all. So what we're going to do is we're going to, you know, set our base exposure. We're going to go, yep, we're virtually clipping on this side. and the shadows are clipping on this side, so the highlights are, and it's pretty even across the board, okay? And that's our base exposure. That's going to be our first exposure, okay? And then from there, if you were going to use something like auto exposure bracketing where your camera does that, what you need to do, great. What you need to do is set your exposure and look at how far, you know, it's going to take for you to capture. I'm just going to reset this, guys, okay? I probably pushed it a little bit hard there. Let me just set this up again. So I probably pushed it a little bit too hard there, just for the example. All right, so basically what we need to work out is how many stops of light it's going to take for my camera to capture this, okay, in an auto exposure bracketing. So if I was to pull this back here and underexpose this scene, okay, we'd probably want to see something like this. And see, now this is probably the second exposure I look at, and I'm looking at this here, and it's probably going to be about 3 stops that I know that I need to capture underexposed, so that I'm holding those highlights back. So you can see now, you know, we haven't got any highlights clipping up here, okay? So we've taken our first frame, which is that balance histogram. Now this is the second frame where we're looking at, and it's underexposed by about 3 stops, all right? And on the inverse, if we were to move our shutter speed till we saw something like that. Hey Paul, how are you, mate? If we were to overexpose our scene till we saw something like that on the histogram, then you can see there's not much clipping there in the shadows, okay? So we've captured all that shadow data. So what we're saying is, in these 3 frames, we're going to capture all that information that this one frame that looks like this can't capture, okay? Does that make sense? So we're going to say we're capturing all this light here, and then we're going to underexpose to capture the rest of the light that was off the end of the histogram on the right hand side like this. That's our underexposed shot. And then we're going to capture all the light that was on the left hand side of this histogram that was clipping on our normal exposure, so that we've basically captured all that dynamic range, all right? And this is why I like to do it in manual. You can do it in auto exposure bracketing. That's where your camera automates that. Long as you know you're capturing all that light, it's important to go back through your shots. If you use that auto exposure bracketing, it's important to go back all your shots and look at that histogram. Go to the central exposed and go, yep, looks pretty good. Go to the underexposed. Make sure there's no clipping on the right-hand side for your underexposed shot, okay? And your overexposed shot, make sure there's no clipping on the left-hand side. And that's how you know you've captured all that dynamic range. But I'll just do that manually myself. I'll just look at the histogram. I'll just move the shutter until I can see my live histogram, because we're in live view, or we're you know, I've got a mirrorless camera and we're looking through the live view at the back. And I will just do that manually. I'll just move that shutter speed up until I've got that histogram that looks like this: overexposed, underexposed, and then, you know, our normal shot. And that's what I would do. And that's allowed me to capture all that dynamic range. None of your other settings change, okay? We're not changing any other settings except our shutter speed, okay? Now, when the times are like this waterfall, where you want a shutter speed that's set to a certain time, then you may have to adjust your ISO up and down to get that dynamic range. So for a scene like this, I might go, okay, I know I want, you know, 1/5 of a shutter speed, or 1/6 of a shutter speed, or 1 second, you know. So that's when I would start to use things like filters and you know, make sure I'm on f8, so I've got that bit of room with my aperture. I'm still getting everything sharp, okay. And then I'd use some filters. What about using a spot meter for highlights? Yeah, Dane, you can certainly do that. You can use your spot meter. I just use the evaluated meter that evaluates the whole scene, mate. And because I'm using manual, it's not the end of the world. Because I'm taking full control over that, okay? By the time I did all that manual, the sun would have gone. Yeah, that's true, Jane. But it gets faster. Like, I've explained a lot, but really it becomes second nature, okay? Because if you're out there and you've planned your shoot, you should have heaps of time, okay? So basically what I would be doing is I'd be going to my shot. So say I got to my location, I've scouted it either the day before if it's sunrise, you know, or I've gone there early for sunset, and I've scouted the location, I've set up my composition. So something to think about, guys, is like, you know, I'll go out and in nature, right? And I'll have my plan, I'll get there, and yeah, sometimes the plan changes, you know, Mother Nature throws a spanner in the works, but often I'll go out and I'll get one composition. I'll get a portrait of that composition, and I'll get a landscape orientation of that composition, and that's it. That's it. I'll come home with 2 different compositions. I'm not running around grabbing, you know, 25 compositions. Does that mean I don't get my long lens out and shoot a bird before sunset, or shoot a wave, or whatever? No, sometimes I will, you know, or I play around with a macro shot or something like that with my second body. But basically, I'm there, I'm set up, I'm there for one composition. That's all I'm looking for, okay? I'm looking what the light's doing, looking what the sun's doing. My sunset shot out in front, I've got that set up. I've got my camera set up there. I'm ready to go. So I've got plenty of time, Jane. Okay, so I've set my aperture to f8 or f16, you know, in between that. So I've got that depth of field, and then I'm just adjusting my shutter speed as the sun's going down. I'm just adjusting my shutter speed, making it longer, so that, you know, my histogram is always ready to be, if we're looking at the histogram now, so my histogram always looks like this. You know, if we're dealing with a high dynamic range, yeah, filters. Okay, so I use variable ND filters for photography, but I don't use it for, you know, I'll use variable ND filters for video, but I don't use it for my photography, John. I mean, they're fine. There's no problems using them. You just have to make sure you get one that's a decent quality, because the lower quality ones, they tend to get that hatching that happens between the 2 bits of glass, and sometimes they won't be as clean as other filters. Okay. So, but yeah, for me, it's just all about, you know, knowing the sky is going to be really bright, and I know I can use my, you know, graduated ND filter, then I'll have that in ready to go, you know. So the idea is to take your time, you know, be there early, take your time, and all this stuff will become second nature. Because once I'm set up and, you know, my focus point's set, you know, I've taken a couple of frames, exposed at the current light condition, I've zoomed in, I've looked, everything's nice and sharp, my focus point's right, then it's just a matter of me changing that shutter speed as the light gets less, okay? Or maybe it's like, okay, I put too many filters on the start, take a filter off, or I need to add another filter because the sky is getting really bright and the foreground's getting, you know, darker. Okay, so it's just little adjustments, you know, things like your composition and those things should already be picked out before you even, you know, the sun's anywhere ready to drop down. So then you've got time to make the shot and make those creative decisions while you're out there. All right. Is there any other questions before we move on? I hope that makes sense. No other questions? Anyway, so that's how I go about it. And it's, you know, like I said, you can use auto exposure bracketing. Just make sure you're capturing all that dynamic range. It's super important, okay? There's nothing worse than getting back and going, oh, hang on, my main shot. Because what will happen is, say your first shot is set up like this, okay? And then your camera's going to go, okay, we shoot one underexposed like this, then we shoot one overexposed like this, and you'll see what's happened is we haven't caught all that detail in those shadows, okay? We've still got clipping, so it's going to take one like this. So that's why it's important to have that exposure when you first start, you know, having the exposure balanced between the highlights and the shadows, so that when you either do it manually, you know, to capture all that dynamic range, underexposed, overexposed, you know, or the camera does it, that you're making sure that you're capturing all that light that's there, okay? And that's why I said, like, it's, you know, so easy to shoot away from the sun, and yeah, and you know, not everyone has filters. So I mean, I know landscape photographers that don't use filters at all, and they just do everything like this, you know, and they're blending them all in post, okay, or doing, you know, HDR. And HDR is one of those terms that gets thrown around, that, but you can do natural looking HDRs. You don't have to have that crazy looking, you know, funky HDR. I mean, yeah, if you're into that, then that's all good. But, you know, you can make natural looking HDRs, you know. It's just a matter of capturing all that dynamic range and doing that blending in post. So why do you have the colors in? So that's just the RGB colors. You can turn that off. That's just showing the different light values there. So, you know, the red, green, blue, that's all it is. That's just the RGB values. To be honest, I don't even use that. So don't stress about that too much. How do we use color? Oh, sorry, maybe I didn't read the question right. Why do they have colors in the histogram? How do we use the colors? Use the colors to help. Yeah, so it can give you an idea. To be honest, I don't use it. I'm just looking at this, mainly the gray part of the slider. It's basically just showing the luminosity, and then it shows you the different colored values in the histogram. It's not something I've ever used or don't use, so sorry about that. And I suppose if there's no other questions, we can move on a little bit further. And what I wanted to talk about is creativity in exposure, okay? And there's a couple of things that are obvious, you know, with exposure. You know, if we're out in the field, hey John, how are you, mate? Welcome, Joe. Sorry, no, I'm John. He's Joe. Hey Joe, how are you, mate? Welcome. So there's a couple of things you can do, you know, if we're out in the field and say for instance, you know, we had a shot like this, or let's have a look. And this is a bit underexposed, but that one's, anyway, this is probably not the best idea. But say you had a shot like this. This one's a bit out of focus, guys, so that one's a bit better. Say you had a shot like this, right? And you wanted to get this whole scene in focus, all right? So we were shooting a macro and we were doing some, I've just lost my train of thought. Focus stacking. So focus stacking is where you focus on this point here and this point here and this point here and the background, okay? Maybe we want to get that sharp. Sometimes we want to do that, okay? And what you would do is you would set your exposure to hold all these back here, but maybe the background shot when you're focusing back there is you want to underexpose that part, okay? So you go ahead, you would take all your focus stacking points along here that you're going to blend later in post. But this background, we might want to underexpose that, okay? And that's where we could use exposure as a creative choice. You know, we're going, okay, that background, we want that darker than our foreground, okay? And we know we're going to take a separate frame at the background here. We're going to focus on that background. Okay, it's blown out at the moment, so not a great example, but say we did want that nice and sharp and we were going to take that as a separate exposure. And then we could underexpose that background so that when we blend it, you know, our foreground and background are lighter and darker. So that's a creative choice. I mentioned before regarding the sun, you know, having that sun in the frame, you know, again, if you can see the sun and you blow that out and you soften that area with a big radial filter and maybe some reverse clarity. Hey Nina, welcome. What you can do is you can always rewatch it later too, guys. If you popped in late, it'll always be up on YouTube, so feel free to pop in later. What you can do, you know, is blow that area out. That's a creative choice with exposure, okay? And of course, you know, if we went to one of these images here and maybe we wanted to make a moody black and white. So maybe we went out there and we go, you know what, I'm going to underexpose this scene. I know I can capture it all in one dynamic range, but I'm going to underexpose it in camera because I know what I want to do is create a moody black and white. Okay, I'm looking at this scene and I'm going, yeah, screen in black and white. I mean, yes, we can do it in post. There's no doubt about it. But I'm just giving you an example, you know, because sometimes you'll see people create photographs like this, you know, like super high contrast, moody black and white like that. And you may go, okay, I'm just going to underexpose all this scene just to hold everything back and make it a moody black and white. So I'll just reset that one. So there are reasons why, you know, you do use exposure, and sometimes it's best, you know, if you're unsure what you're doing in the field and unsure, you know, it's important in post to look at that histogram and have a play around and see what's going to happen. You know, get out there with your camera and move the settings around and watch that histogram. It's all about what's happening in the histogram. Now there will be times, you know, when, you know, a scene needs to have a histogram that looks a bit more like this. Okay, there will be times, you know, for instance, if I'm out there and I want to shoot a silhouette, okay, we've got the bright sun there, we've got the silhouette of a person, but your camera, what's happening, it's metering, it's blowing out the background, okay, the sun's just totally been lost, and that's not the look we're going, because we're looking for, you know, we've got a human element in the scene, we're looking to silhouette that, or we've got a tree line or something we want to silhouette. Then we would underexpose that scene so that our sun was the thing our exposure was set for, and then that foreground, I'm like, yes, it'll be dark, but that's what we're going for. We're going for a silhouette, okay? So that's another reason you would use exposure as a creative tool to manipulate your photographs how you want them to look. Okay, so it's super important, and the histogram is like it becomes your best friend, man. There's no doubt about it when you're out in the field, because there's two things you can't fix in your photograph. One is focus, and the other is, to some degree, exposure. If you really stuff up your exposure in the field, then it's hard to fix that in post. So you want to be giving yourself the best chance in post to do what you need to do creatively to bring out that photograph without losing detail in the highlights, or without crushing those shadows and getting that really bad noise. All right. Is there any other questions? I think that's all I really wanted to cover today. That was pretty much it. I was just going to give you guys a bit more time to answer, to see if you had any questions. Is there anything you need me to cover again? Anything you're unsure of? I don't know about you guys, but it's getting cold here. It's freezing this morning. I'm already feeling like I need another coffee. I'll just wait and see if any more questions come in. If not, that's it for now. One thing I will tell you guys about, there's a link below, guys, and what this is my Team 3CX photography community. We're in here every month. I'll just let you guys know about this. For all you premium members who are here already, thank you. I appreciate for you being part of our community. But you can see we've got lots of different masterclasses in here, abstracts and macro and HDR and lots of things like that. Are you going to do any lessons on shooting videos? John, mate, I haven't talked about shooting videos, but we can, mate, we can. Joseph needs to move his catalog. Okay, so John and Joseph, please just send me an email, help@3colors.co. You guys send me an email, and I can help you if you want got some questions about videos. John and Joseph, if you've got, I can help you with moving that catalog, mate, if you want. All good. All right, so this is the Team 3CX community. Let's have a look in here. So let's have a look at this one. So this is the Minamara Falls one. But I just wanted to show you guys quickly what's going on in the community. So every month we have a field video that we do. We have a post-processing video, and you can see the before and after. So I share all my camera settings there. And, so organizing. Okay, maybe that's another topic for another day. Looks like... Sounds good. I can't wait to get to NZ as soon as things open up. It's definitely on my list. So you can see here we have the assignment with my ugly mug, and then we have all these comments, and you can see what I do is I do a video for everyone. Oh, you're looking at me. What am I showing you? I'm talking about this, and you guys are looking at me. That was an epic fail, wasn't it? All right, let's have a look here. Let's go through that again. Sorry, guys, but I just wanted to quickly show you this before we get out of here. Anyway, this is the Team 3CX community. Pop your questions in as we go, mate, if you've got any questions about what we covered today. But you can see we have all these different masterclasses in here, on everything. Wildlife, macro, I think we're up to 33 different black and white, HDR, panoramas, lots of different stuff, long exposure seascapes. So lots of different things. There's topics in here about everything, okay? And every month I create a new one of these for the community. All right, and let's just jump in here. Sorry, guys, I wasn't clicked on that. That's a rookie mistake. And if you have a look down here, we've got our post-processing camera settings. I share all my camera settings and the before and afters of our photographs. So we get an assignment every month. And what's cool with the assignments is, I'll go through and create a little video for everyone, giving them feedback, giving them some tips, and when they're post-production, you can see the community jumps in and helps each other too. It's just a really lovely way to get together and really take your photography to the next level. Okay, so what's cool, guys, and I'm not going to talk about this too much longer. If you want to jump in, if you've got any questions, you can email me, help@3colors.co. But below this video, you'll see a link where I'm got 30 days for free at the moment, so you can jump in, check it out, and if it's for you, you can hang around. If not, it's all good. There's no problems, there's no pressure. But anyway, that's the Team 3CX community. Super fun, super awesome fun in there. We have all the time, every month, and a great community of people. We also have the hangout area where you can ask questions and do what you need to do. So that's awesome. If you're interested in that, please click the link below, or if you want any more information, just help@3colors.co. Any other last questions, guys? Thanks, Andrew. You're a champion, buddy. So we've got a couple of things there. We've got, so yeah, John, send me an email. Joseph, send me an email about moving catalogs, mate. I can help you with that. And also need some LR organising fixes. Yeah, Nina, just send me an email, help@threecolours.co, and I'll give you a few tips about that. And if it's something, you know, if we get into something that might be worth talking about on a live stream, like how to organise your files in Lightroom or something like that, we might do that. Now, I do have some images. I do have... Thanks, Dave. Awesome, bud. I do have, what was I going to say? So Wednesday morning, we might jump on again. I'm trying to make this a more of a regular thing. So Wednesday morning, I've got some images to edit from the community. So we're just going to do some live critiques and edits. Now, if you go to, thanks, John. If you go to threecolours.co/help, let me do that. threecolours.co/help. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Josh. Awesome, buddy. And the screen looks a bit boogered at the moment. But anyway, if you go here, okay, threecolours.co/help, you can click this help button. There's a bit of a field here, but you can also upload your raw file. What we can do there is I can help you do some edits. So Wednesday, what I've got the community has given me some images they want a hand editing with. So I'm going to edit those live. We'll bring those in. And if you've got one of yourself or you want to add one, please do so. Anyone who's in the community, there's also a link from last month's masterclass that's there as well to a Dropbox folder. Please jump in there. Thanks Dane. Thanks for stopping by, mate. I appreciate it. You can also upload your files there. And yeah, I'm happy to help. I'm just going to edit them up for you on Wednesday, but I'll send you another email anyway. I want to let everyone know who missed this, where the stream is, so they can watch it again. And that's it for now, guys. Just take care of yourselves. I know things are super crazy. We're actually lucky here. You know, it's looking like I'm going to be able to get out and shoot a little bit more. I've been away for work, doing a little bit basically in the national parks by myself. So that's been quite good to get back out in nature. Geez, I've missed it. I really missed it. Yeah, thanks, Joe. No worries, mate. All right, guys, that's it for this one. I hope you and your family are staying safe. I'm super blessed that you decided to come along and join me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And sending heaps of love and happiness your way, man. And just stay out there, keep creating as much as you can. And for all the members who are in here at the moment, there is another masterclass. Hopefully we'll land tomorrow. I'm a little bit late with that, but we're going to be doing some still life stuff. And I have to say, still life is not my speciality, but I tell you what, it's a great way to get creative at home. So we're going to jump into that. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, and remember, if you're interested, 30 days free. There's a link below. If you need a hand with anything, help@threecolours.co. Just email me that. If you've got any topic ideas for these live shows or anything like that as well. Please share this video with all your photography friends. That's sharing the photography love. I would appreciate it. Gets the word out about what we're doing here. And yeah, that's about it, guys. Stay safe, and we'll talk again really, really soon. All right, guys, all the best. Peace.